Ian sucks.
Oh, goddammit.
Got it. Got it.
Well, goodbye, everybody. Recording session's over. All right, no, we're here for a reason. Something different than what we've done the last few times.
And that reason is to talk about one of the greatest underrated series of all time.
Yep, we're here to talk about the Ys games.
We're not going to talk about all of them. We're going to just be covering Ys Origins 1, 2, and 3. If you're unfamiliar with the series, the Ys games are a series of action RPG games similar to maybe what you would say the first one was similar to Legend of Zelda, but it kind of split off on its own. It's known for being a bit more difficult than most of the action RPG games, but still fair. Like the boss fights are difficult, but once you learn the patterns and stuff, it's not really cheap. It's just
and they require
difficult.
maybe a little because they're based off levels and kind of RPG stats, a little bit of grinding sometimes. Just depending on the game, some are more grindy than others, and we'll get into that. So yeah, the Ys games are interesting because one, I'm 100% sure they're called Ys, but they're just spelled YS. So we're just playing.
I'm 90% sure it's pronounced Ys, but
yeah.
What do I know?
What's funny is after the first two, none of the games take place in Ys.
Yeah. Yeah, that makes no sense. Ys Origins does, but
yeah, that's true. Ys Origins does, but that's a prequel.
Yeah, it came out way later.
But
yeah, you also, aside from Ys Origins, you play as the same character in every single game.
Yeah, we'll get into that once we start talking about the Ys series. Specifically, this as a whole. Kind of getting into why I think it'd be important to bring up why this series isn't very well known by people. I would say because the first time I ever heard of the Ys games was on Super Nintendo when I saw Ys 3, and it was just called Wanderers from Ys. That was the original name. Ys 3, Wanderers from Ys. I was like, what the hell is Wise? What the hell is this game?
How do I even read this word? What is this?
What do you mean 3? Where are 1 and 2? I have no idea what's happening right now. Why?
Yeah.
And then I rented it, and it was like a weird side-scrolling game where you walked back and forth, and it was only it was really strange, and I didn't understand it.
Was if I'm not mistaken, the Super Nintendo one was kind of like Zelda 2, right?
Yeah, it was kind of like Zelda 2,
Link.
And I didn't really understand what was happening, and I just died a bunch, and I got frustrated as a kid, and I threw it away. It was like, yeah, not playing this shit anymore. And it wasn't until years later that I came back to the game. But even then, the Ys series really didn't get much stateside love until Oath and Felghana came out on. It was a PC release, right? Originally,
I believe originally it was a PC release, and then was ported to the PSP, if I'm not mistaken.
Yeah, but until Oath and Felghana, it really didn't get no one. I barely knew anyone who knew the Ys series, and to be fair, I wasn't really into it until Oath and Felghana.
If I'm not mistaken, it's because it came out on the TurboGrafx originally. I'll double check that really quick.
And
I had brought fake news.
And I had brought up, there was a version of Wanderers from Ys on the Sega Genesis, but the part of the problem is that these games assume you already kind of know the characters and what's happening, and you don't, so you're just going in it'd be like starting in the Two Towers and being like, well, you know what's going on, right?
We all know this story, right?
So I kind of sell it to that for why Ys never really got popular here. And then when they started actually releasing them, Jonna brought it up in the Sega one again, that they started releasing them on every different kind of system. They're like, this one's going on the N-Gage, and this one's coming out on PC, and this one's on the Vita.
Oh, it actually came out on some old computers back in the day before it was ported to other systems.
Oh, Jesus. But it just took...
Yes, all of these... Here's all the systems that it says on Wikipedia that Ys 1 came out on. It's PC 8801. No idea what that is. An X1, PC 9801, FM7 over 77. I don't know how you fucking read that. FM77 AV, MSX2. I've heard of that one. A family computer, and Sega Mark III, and then Sega Master
Yeah, they
System.
just released this thing shotgun style, and in the U.S. we really didn't get much of it. So that's kind of
Yeah.
like a little history of these. And the one thing that kind of unifies the games is because one, a lot of them are very different in their approach until they started kind of streamlining them all to be similar. Because the remake of Oath 3 Wanderers was the only one that was side scrolling, and they kind of pulled it back with Oath and every game after that. But it's like Jana said, you always play the same character. What's his name?
Adol, the Red.
Adol Christensen.
Yeah.
And the games all have fantastic music. Like
Really good music.
All the Ys games that I've played have had fucking stellar soundtracks.
So the thing about Ys that makes it difficult to follow is, like Ian said, when it first came out, they just like shotgun released it on all these systems, most of which were not super popular in the United States. It never really caught on. There's a lot of discrepancy or a lot of differences, I should say, in the releases. Some of them had cinematics, some of them didn't. Some of them had different art styles, some of them didn't. Some of them had English, some of them didn't. I actually believe the video game channel GameSack did a series on Ys that's actually quite good and explains that bit of the history. But part of it as well, why it never really caught on, is because when they released them in the West, they didn't release them in order, and we actually haven't even received all of the series. There's like one game in the middle that's just missing. I believe it's 5 that we've never gotten a release of, either a release or a remake in the West. And again, like, these games assume that you've played all the other games, but there's one game that it's literally impossible to play legitly if you speak English.
That's a real good way to just screw you over on that stuff.
Yeah. Fortunately, when you get to some of the later games, like, they make references to the old games, but you really don't need to have played all of them to appreciate them as standalone games. When I first started playing, I played Oath of Felghana first. It was my first one. And like Ian said, that's the remake of 3. And then I jumped around a lot. I think the next one I played was like the 7th game. And then I went back and played Ys 1 and 2. And then played Ys 4. I can't remember if 4 or 5 is the one that was missing. And then 6, and then Origins. So I've played them in all over the place.
And then 8 just came out like last year, didn't it?
I believe so. I was waiting for it to release on Switch, which it did, but it came out like fairly recently, and there's just too many other things to play.
So, all right, now that we've kind of given a little bit of background on Ys, I think it'd probably be best to start in order, chronologically, with Ys 1. And the way we both played it was playing through Ys Chronicles of Ys, right? Which was 1 and 2 combined.
Yeah. Yes, that's correct.
Yeah, because neither of us played the original release, because whatever those systems were just never came out here, honestly, and we didn't have them, so that didn't happen. So we both ended up playing Chronicles, which is a remake, a remaster of 1 and 2.
Yeah. So I'll do, generally when I do video game reviews on this, like 2 or 3 of them on this channel, but I like to talk about what was good about it, what was bad about it, what was weird about it. The things that I would say were good about Ys 1 is, again, the music in the series, always good. 2, it like definitely had that old school adventure RPG feel where you're moving from screen to screen. It was very reminiscent of, like I said, like Link to the Past, Zelda Link to the Past. The art in it looked pretty cool. It was fun, and the main thing is the bosses, which is going to be a good point for pretty much every Ys game, is that the boss fights were really cool. I remember the last boss in this game is like legitimately tough.
In Ys 1, he's literally unfairly tough if you don't know the secret to playing him, to beating him.
Yeah,
like you can't actually beat him unless you know the trick, and then it just becomes a normal fight.
Yeah, that's true.
So before John like gets really into it, I'm just gonna give a little background. I don't want to spoil too much of the game because I do think and this is a recommendation. I think all these games should be played by anyone who's listening to this. Like if you like that genre in any kind of capacity, adventure games, those kind of Zelda-ish or like Alundra or like over the top kind of isometric view, I would just recommend playing these games. And the stories aren't super deep, but I still don't want to spoil like too much of them. But basically, the Yeast games in this one starting follow a guy named Adol Christensen, and in this one he's basically there's a country that's been cut off by like hurricane level windstorms, and no one knows what's going on, and he goes in to find out. His ship gets wrecked and he wakes up inside past the storms and finds out like there's this legend of this ancient civilization called Yeast that used to live there that like demons ended up destroying, and he basically sets off on an adventure to find out what's causing the wind wall that's separating this country from the rest of the world, what really happened to Yeast, and like kind of piece that all together. The first game's kind of weird in that the story's really kind of all over the place. The game's old and it definitely can be felt.
It shows its age in that way.
Yeah, so playing the remaster is probably definitely the best way to play it, just because it makes it a little more understandable about what's happening. But yeah, so it's just him setting off to kind of solve the mystery of Yeast, and along the way he meets some friends, meets some foes, and finds out there's some secret going on with some ancient goddesses, and that everything obviously isn't what it seems with Yeast.
Yeah, I believe you're trying to find books that give you information about Yeast in the first one.
Yeah.
That's kind of the whole plot. It's just your general like old school RPG. Like there's this many pieces of MacGuffin, and you need to find those pieces to solve the mystery.
Get those damn MacGuffins.
Yeah. One of the things that's really weird in this game, and it's probably my biggest sticking point with the first one, and I believe it follows in the second one, is that because it was so old when it was released, the technology was so limited that they had trouble animating an attack sequence. Like in Legend of Zelda, you push the button and you see the animation of the sword swiping out and coming back in. They did not do that in Ys. So the way you attack bad guys is you walk into them, and that will hurt them. So the difficulty comes in like which angle you're hitting them, because like if you hit them head on, there's a chance that you'll get hit as well.
Yeah, because they hurt you in the same means by just touching you.
Yeah, by just touching you. So it's kind of weird, and at times a little bit cheap. There are times where I'm like, oh, come on, he definitely did not hit me. That's not fair. But yeah, it's definitely interesting. And they did not fix that in the re-release. Like, they left that
that's how the
as is.
And it's definitely a foible of the first two games, but that's how they were made. And, before we get into, like, the good, bad, and, like, really weird of the two of one, the big thing with it is that to remember that 1 and 2 were originally supposed to be one single game. And it tells because one ends abruptly, and you're like, what?
Yes.
What? And if there wasn't 2 there, I'd be pissed.
Yeah. Like, it's a good thing that it apparently did well enough to warrant the sequel, because, yeah, there was nothing there. That's like, that reminds me of a modern game that did that is Trine 3. Have you ever played that one?
I've played 1 and 2. I've never played 3.
You don't play 3. It was trash. But, so the team that made the Trine games, if you've never played those ones, they're kind of puzzle platformers where you control 3 people that their souls have been binded together. So there's like a thief, a wizard, and a knight. And they each have different abilities that they can use, and you can swap between them freely. And you're basically trying to like separate their souls from each other. And the second one, I don't remember if the first one has multiplayer, but the second one does, and it's actually super fun.
It was really fun.
The third one, they tried to like take a leap into 3D, and the studio was ambitious with it and tried, but they failed kind of spectacularly. Like the combat and stuff didn't transfer well. The controls were abysmal. The world looked nice, but it didn't play well. and it hit the studio hard. It took them a lot longer to make than they thought it was going to, and they just kind of ran out of money. And their studio was on the brink of closing, and they just had to end the game so that they could ship it. And so, like, you're playing through the game, and you're like, oh, okay, so something's going to happen, and then the game's basically like, and this is the end of the game now. Bye, see you. And it just ended. It was actually so bad that the company put out an apology video, like one of the guys like borderline on tears, saying like, we're so sorry, like we know that our fans followed us, and now you guys are going to hate us because we put out this terrible game, and our studio is going to close, and it's going to be horrendous. And they were just like devastated. And the studio almost did close. The only thing that saved them was that when Nintendo was ramping up stuff for the Switch, they hired on a bunch of indie studios to make games that would appear at either exclusively or first on the Switch. And that studio was one of the ones that they hired, and they had them make a game called Nine Parchments, which is a lot. It definitely feels a lot like the Trine games, but plays a bit more like maybe like Gauntlet, and it's really fun. It's a good game.
Yeah, I've heard good things about it. But so after going off of that tangent about Trine, yeah, the big thing with Ys
The
One.
first one is that it ends. Yeah.
So all right, let's both talk about the good of Ys One.
Yeah. Like I said, I think that what I like the most about it is that it definitely has that Legend of Zelda feel without being the same Legend of Zelda games I've played a million times. Like, it was nice to go back to a game that felt very similar to that Super Nintendo era of action RPGs, but have it be something new. Because like I've played almost all of them, all the good ones, right? So it was nice to be able to play a game that felt like that time era, but that was new to me.
Yeah, that was the big thing. It was like it was brand new, so it was kind of like, oh my god, this is really cool to see something else.
Yeah.
In this vein.
And then again, I really like the way that they designed the dungeons and the enemies, and everything looks very unique. Like, the art style is pretty cool in it, and they did a good job of kind of having you go off on missions. Like, if I it's been a while since I've played the game, so forgive me if I make some mistakes here, but I vaguely remember like you continue coming back to a certain town, and you go out after that, and like every NPC and person in the world and stuff has a name and has
because there's only like two.
You have like a catalog of them, right? Like,
yeah, because there's only like one or two towns in the game, so you kind of get a good feel for who everyone is, and everyone is named.
And that becomes important, that each of these like side characters has something about them, because like during the game, events will come up where they'll be like, oh, you need to know something about I don't know, like smithing or whatever. And oh, that's like Jim in this city. Like, I remember he talked about smithing. I'm gonna go find him and talk to him about it. So that was really cool, and I think that's something that even in like the Zelda series, they very rarely did. Like, there were townspeople, but only a handful of them mattered. Or had names or any character whatsoever, and East definitely did not do that.
Yeah, one of the things I'm gonna put as a positive, like jumping into it, is like, you know, thinking of it as an old game, it looked great. The music is fantastic. The thing that he was saying, like, the world is pretty small in one, so it can you can get a good feel of where you're going. Like, there's no map or anything. It's an old school game like that, but you can get a good idea of where you're going because the world isn't so huge that you feel lost. And one of the things I like, you know, Adol is a silent protagonist. You're kind of like, what is his stake in all of this? And it's kind of the same, like, Link's stake, like, just doing what's right. And as we go through these games, I'll talk a lot about Adol. I like Adol a lot, and I've like, if I had played these games as a kid and this had been like a consistent series like Zelda, I probably would like Adol way more than I do Link, just because I don't know, there's something about him, because I think he's a lot more normal than like Link.
Yeah.
And that makes him a lot more likable. Like he has friends and they hang out, and just for some reason, being Adol, just women just throw themselves on him, which is also hilarious because he just doesn't seem to give a shit, which makes it really
Yeah.
funny. He's like, "Sorry, baby, I got things to do."
I only got one lady. And that's Lady Not Justice Adventure.
And Lady Adventure. Yeah, so it's just very entertaining. So Adolf amuses me greatly. But yeah, pretty
Yeah,
much all the positives are
it's
what
good.
Jana brought out. I never found that the game's puzzles like it has a little bit of the issue of old games of like maybe not knowing quite where to go because the game's kind of vague about things. But I never got lost. And needed a guide for it. Like
Yeah.
it took a little bit of
So if
wandering.
we can use that to transition into the negatives. I actually found that was one of my major complaints with East, not just East One, but like a couple of the other ones. I think I had more of an issue with this with East Two, but there were a couple times where like I didn't play for a few days and I would come back and I'd be like, oh fuck, where am I supposed to go? Or like you would run into something and like I said, you need to talk to someone in town and I would forget who it was that I had talked to about that thing. And that's I mean it took like 2 seconds of Googling to be like, oh yeah, that guy. That's it. But yeah, it definitely does have that PG issue of not being quite as clear as it should be. It's not game breaking by any stretch of the imagination, but it is definitely a a tick against the series sometimes.
Yeah, and I'm gonna put in the negatives for Yeast One is the combat's weird, and it's just not something you're ever gonna get used to because you're thinking so much
Yeah,
of the other. I would find myself pressing a button to attack and be like, God damn it, that's not what you do in this game.
yeah,
um,
it's serviceable. It serves its purpose, but it's not good.
yeah,
Like it's
and
not.
and the big thing that my big negative, if I'm gonna have to throw a negative at this game, is that and this is a problem. This is going to be a problem in 1 and 2 and 3 less, and Origins almost not at all. Is that this game has a difficulty spike, and you know exactly where it is, John. Is as soon as you get
Oh yeah,
to
absolutely.
to like the last part, because a little bit of a spoiler, the whole like last story arc of one takes place in one place, and you can't leave
Yeah.
once you go there. And the
Yep.
game's suddenly like, hey, hope you leveled or get
If you didn't,
fucked.
if you didn't have fun restarting.
Yeah, like it literally feels like you almost would have to restart if you didn't come in
Yeah.
prepared there. And so the game is just like you don't have to grind and you better grind before you finish.
Yeah, that's what I was going to say is that again it gets less so much in Origins and some of the later ones, some of the other later ones they definitely scaled back on this, but the earlier East games do require quite a bit of grinding
Yeah.
to get through the end part of them. So
All right, and I guess what's your weird? What's your weird on Ys One?
the weird for East One, even though I already used it in the bed, it's still just not fucking swinging a sword. It's so awkward.
It's
It's so fucking awkward. Like when I first started playing, I thought like, oh, I can't attack. Maybe I didn't pick up a weapon, or maybe I didn't equip something, or like. And now it's just charging headfirst into bad guys is fucking weird.
yeah.
Um,
I'm gonna throw my weird on it. Is that is the one thing I like is that people just suddenly like adore Adolf. like
yeah, that's true.
like
He's
people
definitely got anime protagonist
yeah
syndrome.
the game has a this is 1 and 2 like it's hard to talk about one without talking about two but the game is very anime tropey in a lot of ways and one of those is that people are just like, oh hey, this guy's great, aren't you great? And it's really funny. Like it doesn't bother me because the game's so good, but I'm just like, this is awkward. And also when it's like the secret of the two goddesses, who could they be? I'm never gonna spoil it, but as soon as you meet some people, you're like, it's you. I know who it is.
Yeah, that is definitely an issue with the East games. There's one, I want to say it's like E7, where there's a part where like again, it's not really going to spoil anything because if you have two brain cells, you'll put this together the first time you see it. But like, there's like a character that's like a princess that ran away, and like the whole game, they're like, "Excuse me, I mean, whatever your name was, I don't remember her name. It's been a while since I played the game." And she's like, "Oh yeah, my dad. I mean, the king." Blah blah blah, and they do this throughout the whole game. And then later, when she reveals herself to be the princess, they try to play it off as this big reveal. I'm like, you can't play that off as a big reveal when you basically slapped me in the face with it for the last 10 hours. Like,
Yeah, basically. I'm gonna put a little bit of weirdness before we move on to East 2, is that the game's levels ends at like level 10. It only has like 10 levels, something like that. 20 maybe.
it was some weird number, yeah, some
really
bizarre,
weird,
like,
bizarre number of levels, like that. You're like, what? Okay,
why here? Why here? Like, and I remember I hit that level way before I finished the game.
Oh yeah, you hit
So
it.
there was
You
like
hit it. Wait, if you do a little bit of, if you do the grinding you need to, you'll be max level for the whole last area, and you need to be.
Yeah. So like you're playing a significant chunk of the game at max level, which feels bad because then when bad guys get harder, you're like, well, fuck, there's nothing I can do about this. Like,
Just deal with it. Basically, that's all you can do. All right, so
yeah,
I think with that,
Yeast 2.
moving into Yeast 2, which is just Yeast 2, Yeast 2 literally starts the minutes after Yeast 1. Like
yeah, immediately after Yeast 1. Yeah.
Yeah, the story just jumps right into it, and it's basically once you've figured out the secret of Yeast, you're on Yeast, and now you're trying to figure out, well, why is Yeast here, where it is, which I'm not going to spoil, and what happened, and that's kind of what that game becomes. And this one has more towns. I think this one has 4 towns.
Yeah, it's definitely bigger than the first one.
Yeah, it's a bigger game than the first one. There's more areas, there's more monsters, there's more levels, there's more everything. It's just a bigger game.
Yeah.
And you could,
but still no attack animations.
Yeah, it still plays exactly the same as first. I think it plays better than the first. Things seem a little more what's the word, like, what did you say your control is crunchy?
I'm gonna smack you for that. No, it's not crunchy.
No, it's not crunchy. No. The game just plays smoother. Like, the game just plays a little smoother, and it's obvious, you can tell because it was a sequel and not like immediate, that they learned from one in some of the
things. You can definitely tell. Like, I don't think it came out that much after the first one. I want to say it's only like a year or two after the first one was released, but you can definitely tell that the team learned a bit more of what they were doing. The world seems a little bit more sensical. The story seems a little bit more polished.
Yeah, the story flow is way better than in one. The story flows a lot better.
If you went on any of the fan sites or anything like that, you could see that the summary of the first game is going to be very small and very kind of scattered, and the second one actually follows more of a narrative. But yeah, they did an excellent job of tying it in. I think going into the good and bad and weird of this one, like the good and bad are, like we already said, for the good, like it's bigger, it's more well organized.
Honestly,
it's essentially the same game. It's essentially the same.
Yeah, like the good and the bad are pretty much along the same lines. The only thing I'd say is more good is that the last boss isn't a gimmick like one, where one, he's a gimmick last boss. Like, you have to know what the gimmick is to beat him. In two, it's not. The good it's like you brought, like John said, it's bigger and better, and that's what a sequel should be. So it's just everything you liked, more of it. Everything you didn't, we kind of fixed a lot of those. Not everything. It still has its foibles. It's still a little grindy, but it not nearly as grindy. I probably had to grind for like 45 minutes altogether to be in a good pace for the rest of the game.
It's definitely one of those games where this is another thing with like games like Lunar or stuff like that you do have to grind, but if you find the right place to grind, then it's easy.
Yeah.
So like an example is like in Lunar Sewer, where there's like a healing spot, and I would just grind there because you like battle, heal, heal, and just keep doing that over. Yeah. And it definitely cuts down on that.
And like a lot of the older games, if you choose to grind a little bit throughout it instead of picking one place to power grind, it feels it doesn't, you don't suffer as much. Like if you're like,
it doesn't slow down the game as much.
I'm gonna take 30 minutes here and do some grinding, and then like play some more for a few hours, and then 30 minutes here and do some grinding. But yeah, the good and the bad are pretty much the same. I mean, even with as far as it goes, with people just suddenly loving Adol cracks me up. Like just as anime tropey as the first one. I have to say, as a good, it has a lot more cool area. Like a lot of the like areas look a lot cooler. Even like the not just the battle areas, like the main town and like the field of flowers outside of it, and where you can see like the Temple of Solomon. The main area you're trying to get to is the middle of East is the Temple of Solomon, and you can see it off in the distance. Like that's your eventual destination.
I would say my favorite thing about it is, for the good, is that they did a better job of world building, and when you're playing in it, it feels like the world of East is much bigger than just the adventure that you're on.
Yeah,
which the first game kind of did, but they really did a much better job of it in the second one. Like you feel like there's this history. And again, I don't want to go too much into it because I don't want to spoil any of the story elements for anyone who wants to play through it. But you definitely get a sense of like, oh, this world has some history and some context. And in the first game, like Ian said, it just starts with you being like, I'm a dude from somewhere on a boat. Yeah, I'm here now. You don't really get a view of that outside world, and you definitely do in this one. So,
yeah, so like
I enjoyed that.
Past the good and the bad, which are pretty much on the same level, I'd say the weird of two is the transforming parts. I don't know if I'd put that in weird or bad, because it felt like, you know what I'm talking about. We had to keep transforming into a Rue and then back to a person, then transforming again.
Yeah.
And it just kind of, it was weird, and it kind of put a almost like a slowdown on the game. Like things, like it slowed the pacing. There we go. That's the word. It was kind of a weird. It made the pacing really weird, because you could turn into you could turn into a monster to talk to monsters, but you have to kind of do it back and forth in this one part, and it just kind of really messes with the pacing. And I guess the other weird is that again, what's going on kind of before the characters too.
Yeah. I would say that was probably my weird one, is like the storytelling is really weird, because it's like, why are you telling me things that the characters, shouldn't I learn this at the same time as the characters? Like, this seems really odd, especially in a game where like you're focused on just one character. I'd get if you were like jumping around, but I don't know. That's basically it for me.
Yeah,
again, it's been a long time since I've played these games, so East 1 and 2. They're not ones that I go back to a lot. They're definitely worth playing. I would not start the series with them. Like, I would definitely start the series with the third one.
And
the remade.